Well, Iran is taking military action today after the U.S. launched what President Trump is calling his Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz.
U.S. Central Command says Iran fired cruise missiles and drones at U.S. flagged ships and U.S. Navy ships.
The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Combat ineffective, decimated, destroyed, defeated, pick your adjective.
At 0537 local time, a 23-foot fiberglass hull with 2 outboard engines and 6 men aboard cuts its throttle to idle speed in the shadow of Keshem Island and waits. The driver watches the horizon through salt-crusted binoculars. He is looking for the single largest man-made object that will move through the Strait of Hormuz today. He finds it, a gray mass pushing east through the pre-dawn blue, throwing a wake wide enough to swamp everything within 200 yards. The USS Abraham Lincoln, 100,000 tons of sovereign American territory carrying 44 Boeing F-18E and F Super Hornets, 5,000 sailors, and enough aviation fuel to keep a regional airline flying for a month. The driver reaches for his radio and speaks one word. The word carries across 14 separate channels to 29 other boats scattered in a loose constellation across 8 nautical miles of Iranian coastal water. Engines cough to life in sequence. Bows tilt upward. Spray begins to fly. And $6 million worth of fiberglass and gasoline begins converging on $4.5 billion worth of floating airfield. The Strait of Hormuz is not open ocean. It is a bottleneck 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest crossing, but the navigable channel for a Nimitz-class carrier drawing 37 feet of water is far tighter than that. Shallow reefs, commercial traffic lanes, and the territorial boundaries of Iran and Oman squeeze a ship the length of the Empire State Building into a corridor that offers almost no room to maneuver. Every naval strategist on Earth knows this. The Iranians have built an entire military doctrine around it. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, not the conventional Iranian Navy but the parallel force that answers directly to the supreme leader, operates roughly 1,500 fast attack craft along this coastline. Most are variants of locally built fiberglass speedboats capable of 45 to 55 knots. They carry anything from heavy machine guns to Chinese-derived C-701 anti-ship missiles. A single boat costs somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000 depending on armament. The jet engine hanging under the wing of one F/A-18 Super Hornet costs more than all 30 boats combined. That math is the entire Iranian strategy. 0539 local time. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the Lincoln, 2 decks below the flight deck and sealed behind blast-hardened steel, a radar operator tags the first contact, then the second. By the time she reaches 7, the display is beginning to look less like a contact picture and more like a migration pattern. She keys her headset. Multiple fast movers bearing 086 through 110. Range 9 nautical miles. Closing at 40+ knots. No response to automated identification queries. The surface warfare coordinator leans forward and watches the count climb past 15. Past 20. At 27, he picks up the handset to the bridge. At 30, the captain is already looking at the same feed on his repeater screen. 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers ride escort, one 2,000 yards forward to starboard, one 1,800 yards aft to port. Each displaces 9,200 tons. Each carries 96 vertical launch cells loaded with a mix of surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and anti-submarine rockets. Each mounts a Mark 45 5-inch gun, a 62 caliber barrel that can put a GPS-guided round through a specific window at 15 nautical miles. Right now those barrels are pointed at targets close enough to hit with a slingshot. 0541 local time. On the flight deck, an aviation bosun's mate standing on the starboard catwalk raises binoculars and sees what the radar already knows. Wakes. Dozens of them. White streaks fanning across blue water like cracks spreading through glass. He can make out hull shapes now. Low profiles. Open cockpits. Men crouched behind makeshift shield plates. Spray exploding over bows as each boat slams through the morning chop at speeds that would flip a civilian pleasure craft. The first radio challenge goes out from the forward destroyer. Unidentified Iranian small craft, this is United States Navy warship operating in international waters. Alter your course immediately and maintain a safe distance. The transmission repeats in Farsi. Silence. A second hail. Silence. A third. The boats keep closing. Silence has a grammar of its own in the Strait of Hormuz, and every American sailor in the formation can read it fluently. 3 nautical miles to the northeast, a Panamanian flag tanker loaded with 2 million barrels of Saudi crude pushes through the traffic separation scheme at 12 knots, fat and slow and worth roughly $170 million in cargo alone. 20% of the world's traded oil passes through this chokepoint every day. The Iranians chose this morning to turn the chokepoint into a chessboard. 0543 local time. The swarm resolves into structure. 3 clusters, each operating with a distinct role. The outer ring, roughly 10 boats, crosses back and forth at the edge of radar coverage, weaving through each other's wakes, generating false vectors and clutter. The middle layer, 8 boats, presses toward the destroyers on divergent bearings, forcing each escort to track multiple approach angles simultaneously. The inner group, 12 boats, ignores the escorts entirely and drives for the water the carrier is about to occupy. The Iranians have studied American naval doctrine the way a boxer studies tape. They know the escorts will not abandon the carrier to chase individual contacts. They know the carrier will not execute violent turns in a restricted channel with 37 feet of draft and coral heads on either side. They know that American rules of engagement require proportional response and positive hostile intent before weapons release. Every second of hesitation compresses the geometry in their favor. Their plan is to overload the American decision cycle, to force a choice between shooting early and becoming the aggressor on the world stage, or shooting late and absorbing damage. It is genuinely brilliant asymmetric warfare refined over 4 decades of exercises in this exact waterway. It accounts for American firepower, American doctrine, American caution, and American politics. It accounts for everything except what is circling at 28,000 feet and has been there since before sunrise. 0544 local time. Range to the nearest contact drops below 5 nautical miles. The forward destroyer adjusts course 2 degrees to port, a movement small enough to appear routine and large enough to be visible from every boat on the water. Its 5-inch gun mount trains left. The barrel tracks smoothly, settling on the lead element of the starboard cluster. A Sikorsky MH-60 Seahawk lifts from the aft destroyer's flight deck, nose dropping immediately as it surges forward and low, skimming 40 feet above the water toward the inbound contacts. Its chin-mounted forward-looking infrared camera feeds live imagery straight into CIC. The picture that comes back changes the temperature of the room. 12 boats in the lead group, multiple armed personnel visible. One boat carrying a DSHK heavy machine gun on a pedestal mount, a Soviet-designed 12.7mm weapon that fires rounds the size of a man's thumb at 600 rounds per minute. Another boat with what appears to be a 107mm rocket rack fixed to the bow. 2 more carrying objects lashed under tarps near their sterns, bulky, cylindrical, and positioned exactly where you would put a weapon you did not want seen from the air. The Seahawk pilot transmits 3 words. Weapons observed. Multiple. The captain speaks for the first time since the contacts appeared. Set condition 1 throughout the formation. Armed response stations manned and ready. Hold fire until hostile act or hostile intent is confirmed. Nobody asks for clarification. In this water, confirmation tends to arrive at 600 rounds per minute. What the swarm does not know, what the men in those boats cannot see from water level, is that the Abraham Lincoln's air wing began repositioning 90 seconds ago. 2F divided by a -18F Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 213, already airborne on routine combat air patrol 40 nautical miles to the south, have turned north and gone to full military power. At 1,190 miles per hour, they will be overhead in under 2 minutes. They are not coming to drop bombs on speedboats. They are coming because of what is hiding in the mountains 35 nautical miles north along the Iranian coast. 0547 local time. Range to the nearest boat falls below 3 nautical miles. The details are ugly now. Through high-powered optics, American gunners can see individual faces. Men crouched behind thin steel plates. Hands on weapons. Hulls slamming wave crests so hard the impacts travel up through every spine aboard. They are operating at the ragged edge of control. Boats overloaded, seas building, speed maintained by pure commitment. A crew-served weapon does not need to be accurate when the target displaces 100,000 tons. A warning flare arcs from the starboard destroyer, red phosphorus streaming smoke as it drops ahead of the lead Iranian boat. The international signal is unambiguous. Turn away now. The boat accelerates. 2 more surge alongside it, using the flare's splash point as a distance marker. They are not confused. They know exactly how close they are. They want to be closer. 0549 local time. A flash breaks from one boat in the starboard cluster. Small, sharp, low trajectory across the water. Something strikes the sea 30 yards off the destroyer's bow and kicks up a narrow column of spray. That is not a warning shot. That is not a navigational error. That is a hostile act under every rule of engagement the United States Navy has ever written. Engage designated hostile contacts. Weapons free. The order moves through the formation like current through a wire. On the forward destroyer's starboard bridge wing, a gunner opens with a controlled burst from a mounted M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun. Not spray fire. A measured line of tracers stitched across the water 10 yards ahead of the lead boat, then walked directly into the hull when it does not alter course. 50 caliber rounds, each 1/2 an inch in diameter and traveling at 2,910 feet per second, punch through fiberglass as if it were wet paper. The bow digs. The port engine detonates in a burst of gray smoke. The hull rolls hard and vanishes behind a curtain of its own spray and debris. The Seahawk is already diving on the next contact. Its door gunner fires a burst from a cabin-mounted M240 across the bow of a boat carrying the 107mm rocket rack. Rounds walk across the weapon mount. The launcher splinters. The boat hooks violently to port. One man goes over the side. Somewhere in Tehran, the gap between a war game and a war just became measurable in human-sized splashes. 0550 local time. The swarm does not retreat. It fractures. Outer boats swing wide, trying to pull the escorts out of position. Inner boats push harder, gambling that speed and chaos can crack the defensive ring before the Americans find their rhythm. Then a rocket launches. It comes from a boat buried in the middle layer, masked by the wakes of two boats ahead of it. The smoke trail is brief, unstable, and low. The weapon skips across the wave tops, passes 40 yards wide of the aft destroyer, and detonates against empty ocean in a flat orange blast that throws spray 50 feet into the air. No hit. But the engagement has just crossed a threshold that does not have a reverse gear. 40,000 feet above the strait, the two Super Hornets check in with the carrier's tactical air controller. Their targeting pods are looking down at the surface fight, but their real assignment is 35 nautical miles to the north. 3 NOR anti-ship missile batteries embedded in hardened positions along the Iranian coastline have been warming their fire control radars for the past 6 minutes. Each NOR is a Chinese-derived C-802 variant, 21 feet long, carrying a 363-pound warhead at 680 miles per hour, skimming 15 to 20 feet above the waterline in its terminal phase. Against a maneuvering carrier with full escort coverage and airborne early warning, the intercept odds are manageable. Against a carrier that has stopped to deal with a swarm attack in a 21-mile wide channel, the math changes in ways that keep Navy planners awake at night. That was the plan. The boats were the Matador's cape. The missiles were the sword. What Iran did not know was that an E-18G Growler, the Navy's dedicated electronic warfare aircraft, had been orbiting at 28,000 feet since 0430 local time. Its ALQ-99 tactical jamming pods had mapped every radar emission along the Iranian coast for 90 minutes. Every fire control radar, every search sweep, every frequency hop. The shore batteries were not hidden. They were cataloged, prioritized, and already assigned to a strike package sitting in the Super Hornets mission computers. If those batteries lit up, the response time was under 4 minutes. 2 AGM-88E ARGM missiles, each one a 13-foot radar-seeking weapon that homes on electromagnetic emissions at Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, and arrives with 150 pounds of fragmentation warhead delivered directly into the antenna that made the mistake of transmitting. The sword was visible before the cape ever moved. 0553 local time. 8 Iranian boats are dead in the water. Burning. Broken. Spinning in slow circles with their engines gone and their crews clinging to what remains. But the survivors begin to adapt. They stop charging in straight lines. They cross each other's wakes, use offset angles, duck behind the commercial tanker's radar shadow to the northeast. One group feints toward the destroyers while another cuts north toward civilian shipping, trying to use merchant hulls as background clutter that American gunners will hesitate to fire through. The carrier strike group answers with something worse than firepower: patience. The escorts shift to sector defense. Each destroyer owns a quadrant. The Seahawk marks every boat that still shows closing intent. A second helicopter spins up from the carrier's flight deck to cover the gap to the north. The Americans stop reacting boat by boat and begin dismantling the swarm as a system. 0558 local time. A 5-boat cluster off the starboard quarter executes the smartest tactical move of the entire morning. They identify a seam between the carrier's wake turbulence and the forward destroyer's coverage arc, a blind spot created by the geometry of a moving formation in a narrow channel. They time their approach to coincide with 2 decoy boats feinting east, pulling the Seahawk's attention for 8 critical seconds. The second helicopter catches it. It drops across the lead boat's bow at 30 feet, rotor wash flattening the sea surface and blasting spray directly into the crew's faces. They flinch. That half-second flinch breaks their spacing. The forward destroyer's 5-inch gun fires a single round into the water 15 yards ahead of the lead hull. The concussion alone is enough to lift the bow. The crew hesitates. The M2 gunners do not. 2 bursts. The lead hull disintegrates into fiberglass shrapnel and spray. The second boat swerves into wake turbulence and slams off a wave so hard a man is thrown forward into the weapon mount. The third finds the inner security ring already closed. A burst walks across its engine cowling. Smoke pours out. Speed dies. The remaining 2 peel off and run. Iran spent 40 years developing swarm doctrine for the Strait of Hormuz. The Americans dismantled it in 12 seconds of coordinated geometry. Somewhere in a Pentagon briefing room, a slide nobody thought they would actually need just became the most relevant document in the building. 0601 local time. One final cluster makes its run. 5 boats, tight-packed, driving for the narrowing gap between the carrier's port quarter and the aft escort. It is the most dangerous attempt since the fight began. If a single hull penetrates the inner ring and detonates a contact charge or fires a weapon at point-blank range, the entire strategic equation of American power projection in the Persian Gulf changes overnight. The Americans are waiting. The Seahawk pins the lead boat with infrared optics. The aft escort slides left to narrow the corridor to less than 400 yards of open water. The forward destroyer holds pressure on the remaining outer contacts. Every American platform executes a different piece of the same problem at the same instant. The lead boat presses anyway. It gets closer than any hull has gotten all morning, inside 800 yards of the carrier's waterline. Then the aft destroyer fires. A short burst from the M2 tears into the bow at the waterline. The hull lifts, stalls, and slaps back down into white water. The second boat turns away immediately. The third overcorrects and slams sideways into the debris field of the first. The last two never reach the line. 0604 local time. CIC to bridge. All contacts opening range or dead in the water. Outer security perimeter re-established. That single sentence means the swarm has failed. More than half the Iranian boats are destroyed, disabled, or scattered beyond any distance that matters. The carrier has not altered course. Not once. The formation is intact. The flight deck is undamaged. The shore-based nor batteries never fired because the growler overhead made it radiantly clear that the first transmission on a fire control frequency would be the last thing those batteries ever did. The sword never left its sheath because the hand reaching for it was already pinned to the table. $6 million in fast attack craft came for a $4.5 billion aircraft carrier and did not make it stop, turn, or flinch. The entire Iranian attack cost less than the fuel the Lincoln burned while swatting it aside. The Navy will spend more on the after-action paperwork than Iran spent on the operation. 0610 local time. The surviving boats retreat toward the Iranian coastline. Some limp at 5 knots trailing smoke. Some race at full throttle with half their crew missing. None hold formation. The water behind them is streaked with fuel sheen, drifting debris, and the expanding distance between what was planned in a briefing room and what happened on the ocean. The Abraham Lincoln continues its transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Still at speed, still on course, still pulling data from every sensor in the formation, because in this waterway, the next problem is never more than 20 minutes away. Off the starboard quarter, smoke from a burning Iranian hull flattens in the rising heat and begins to dissolve into the morning haze. Ahead, the strait opens just enough to allow the escorts to widen their screen. 30 boats came in fast, loud, and committed. The American response came back slower, quieter, and absolute. The swarm learned something fundamental in the Strait of Hormuz that morning. Speed is a tactic, coordination is a system, and a system does not flinch. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on what happens when Iran's shore-based missiles actually launch against a carrier strike group. Bye for now.